Today I'm pleased to introduce a fellow Texan, Tre Pennie, who's a sergeant, but also I see a doctor. Got a doctorate from Texas Tech University. But more to the point, at the age of 16, Sergeant Pennie experienced a personal tragedy that would shape the trajectory of his life when his cousin was shot and killed a day before her wedding. This experience and the officer's response to that tragedy put him on a path to protecting and serving our communities. Originally he served in the Army. He served 4 years and simultaneously graduated with an associate degree in Administration of Justice from Honolulu Community College. Sergeant Pennie then made his way back to Texas and joined the Dallas Police Department, where he eventually rose to the rank of sergeant. While serving on the force, he continued his education and obtained multiple advanced degrees, including a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Midwestern, master's degree in counseling from Prairie View A&M, and the doctorate of education from Texas Tech. In July of 2016, Dallas, Texas experienced a horrific attack on our law enforcement officers when a deranged gunman shot and killed 5 officers and injured 9 others. And at the time, Mr. Chairman, Chief Brown, who's now chief of the Chicago Police Department, was chief of the Dallas Police Department, where I met him at the time. Sergeant Pennie used this unspeakable loss to fuel his efforts to stand up for his fellow officers and their families. He now serves as a president and executive director of the National Fallen Officers Association and has worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between police and the communities they serve, helping raise awareness for fallen officers and their families, and he's advocated for policy changes that would protect law enforcement and provide financial assistance to the family of those fallen officers. Sergeant Pennie, I want to thank you for being here today and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator. On behalf of law enforcement officers across this country, I'm honored to appear before this committee to speak on a topic that's near and dear to my heart: protecting our police and protecting our communities. According to the FBI, 2021 marked the highest number of law enforcement officers murdered in more than 2 decades. Of the 633 line of duty deaths last year, there were 73 felonious killings. That should come to no surprise to anyone, especially considering the coordinated efforts that were used to undermine our police. As the chance to defund the police got louder, more police officers died and families were left to pick up the pieces. The rise in anti-police sentiment has led to a rash of attacks on police officers nationwide. In 2021 alone, there were 86 premeditated ambush-style attacks. So far in 2022, there have been 35, and this trend doesn't appear to be slowing anytime soon. So how did we get here? In 2014, the Ferguson riots gave rise to a new paradigm of violence against our police under the pretext Black Lives Matter. Although many people from churches and schools and inner city communities just wanted to peacefully protest, radical groups and extremists had a different agenda. It didn't matter whether the police were right or wrong. The Black Lives Matter organization saw an opportunity to exploit high-profile incidents involving the police to fundraise and further their radical agenda. For me, it was undeniable what Black Lives Matter was doing, because they were pulling directly from the black nationalist playbook, which overlooked violent crime in the black communities but magnified incidents involving the police. I was very familiar with this tactics because they were similar to the tactics that black nationalists used in the early 1990s in Houston, Texas, when I grew up as a teenager. The only difference was that Black Lives Matter used social media instead of a bullhorn microphone to amplify their radical message. Some of the rioting tactics used in the early 90s included organizing protests late in the evening and encouraging people to wear dark clothing so they can hide their criminal behavior. They understood that police were limited in their responses and capabilities, so they used diversionary tactics to distract police and cause more damage, looting, violence, and destruction. They also knew how to use media to manipulate the message and turn everyone against the police. I warned about this threat early on, but no one would listen because of the race dynamic. Even after the July 7, 2016 attack in Dallas, Texas that claimed the lives of 5 police officers, 4 of which were personal friends. No one would listen. By the summer of 2020, Black Lives Matter had escalated into full-blown riots, coinciding with the George Floyd murder. Realizing that police officers were at a disadvantage, other fringe anarchist groups around the country began waging attacks against police officers as well. We saw that especially in cities like Minneapolis, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, and Kenosha. The riots were uncontrollable. Police agencies didn't have the resources or manpower to deal with the mobs, nor did they know who was friend or foe. Police were essentially forced in an unattainable situation because the rules of engagement were imbalanced. On June 5th, 2020, Washington, D.C. Mayor approved to have the words Black Lives Matter painted on 16th Street leading to the White House. The message ended with defund the police. The defund the police message became the rallying cry for radicals across the country to protest and riot and loot across this country. In response to the defund the police movement, cities and across this nation began cutting budgets in solidarity with the movement. The lack of support for police led to police officers resigning, retiring, and many withdrawing from our police academies. As violent crime spiked in our inner cities, police agencies struggled to maintain their rates. Due to the high attrition rate, police officers were required to work extra shifts to compensate for the lack of manpower. The reduction in resources and low morale increased mental health problems for law enforcement officers. The combination of these factors led to overwhelming stress on these police officers, which resulted in higher suicide rates. The defund the police movement is also responsible for the overcorrection by these progressive DAs in their refusal to prosecute criminals. Police officers nationwide have expressed their frustration with having to arrest the same criminals over and over again because of no bail initiatives. The defund the police movement has done more damage than anyone can imagine. Thank you.
Sergeant Pennie, you spoke about the online radicalization of individuals who target the police and organized targeting of police officers. What is the relationship between the defund the police movement and the targeted violence against law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. Yeah, you can have something as benign as defund the police, like it was, just the logo. But once you take that on social media, the message proliferates with the hashtag. And I think that's what we've lost so much in discussion because we think of it as just being benign. But the reality is radical groups, individuals use this same content to incite violence against police. So let's think about it. In Minneapolis alone, it was trending with defund the police, right? Not that the city of Minneapolis wanted to burn down their own city, but I mean, even though they did defund it by $8 million, but the bottom line is it was that message of defund the police was trending on social media, and radical groups, individuals attached to it. And once that hashtag, once that image begins, being transferred along or proliferating through social media, more people are going to attach to it, and that's how you saw some of the riots happen over and over again. We need to have better regulation of these social media platforms. We need to have better control over the content that's being used to incite violence against police. Yeah, it may not necessarily be the benign image itself, but when that image is attached to hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag defund the police, hashtag kill the police, that's the thing that you have to worry about is what's proliferating with the message. And that's how those groups organize, Senator. Thank you.
Sergeant Pennie, in your written testimony, you acknowledge that some good people only wanted to peacefully protest police brutality. Yet the research shows that police officers rarely use excessive force. For example, only about 1% of police shootings are unjustified, and yet it's sometimes used as an excuse to justify attack on police. Do you think that it's reasonable for critics to say that police brutality is the cause of attacks on police?
Absolutely not. First of all, I mean, we're talking about more nuanced type issues, look, we have to qualify what police brutality is, because if you think about it, an officer can be accused of use of force violations. I mean, and it happens all the time. But a lot of times when they're adjudicated in court, they come out that they did follow the NIJ use of force continuum, and these officers are acquitted and the case goes away. So I think we do need to qualify what we're talking about in terms of this police brutality thing. But no, the bottom line is we cannot, under any circumstance, allow attacks on our police officers. Regardless of what these individuals say they're protesting police officers for, we're not going to give validation for it. In fact, I think we need to start holding individuals accountable, which we have not done a great job of prosecuting radical groups and people that incite violence against police officers using what we have on the books already, domestic terrorism policy. 18 U.S.C. 2331, Section 5, domestic terrorism, essentially lays it out. The DOJ tells us that individuals that use force and intimidation for the purposes of changing governmental policy or acting in line with domestic terrorism. Okay, so why don't we have penalties for those individuals that do that? Thank you, Senator.
Sergeant Pennie, do you think anti-police rhetoric and violence trickles down into the community? And what impact do you think this has on members of communities throughout our country?
I'm sorry, Senator. It has a major impact on communities across this country, especially our communities of color. I'm active in the black community around the country, not just locally in Texas, but I travel the country and try to engage with the black community because I want to build a relationship between the police and the community. And what many of these people have told me was that they never agreed to a defund the police initiative. What happened was you had these politicians that got online and put out their messages about defunding the police, and it just proliferated through social media. But the reality is those communities with people of color were being victimized at a higher rate than anywhere else in this country. And the bottom line is we haven't found any way to hold the individuals accountable that have proliferated this message, that have allowed our police to be attacked. We just have to find a way, Senator, to where we can hold individuals accountable for using rhetoric, and a lot of leadership here in Congress, a lot of leadership here. We have to find a way to hold these people accountable for encouraging the type of acts that's happening right now in our society. Thank you.
So the violence that occurs as a result of anti-police rhetoric very often isn't focused in the gated communities of the wealthy and the well-connected.
Absolutely not. No, it's the communities that are already having problems. I mean, this is what do you think the criminals come from? The criminals are right there alongside the people that they're living with, all the ghettos, the projects in the inner city. What do you think these criminals get out? They get out of prison and go right back into those communities. Who do you think they're victimizing? A lot of these people can't pack up and just leave the community. That's like the catch-22 with these arguments. You know, we talk about why don't they just leave? Well, a lot of people can't leave. Half of my family is still in the inner city right now. They can't leave. They don't have the resources to up and go. But they're still being victimized by the criminals that are living beside them, that are living in these communities. So I will say there has to be accountability for rhetoric that's used to incite violence against our police across the country.
You move on. Mr. Pennie, I see you shaking your head, and I know you want to respond to that. So quickly, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Senator. The unfortunate reality is that this whole defund the police, the legitimacy of our officers has led to officers not even wanting to go into the profession. And the bottom line is you have a lot of these DAs that are releasing these criminals back onto the streets. The officers they've already said they're tired of doing this double work over and over again. And let's put this in context. We want to talk about the real beast in the room. We're talking about an 85% recidivism rate of violent felons that come out of prison. They come out, and within 5 years, they're going right back for similar crimes. So we have to figure out how to close this loophole to stop our...
Okay, so let me interrupt
Absolutely.
you right there. Closing that loophole, goes to that issue of respect and the tearing down of respect and the ability of law enforcement to do their job, correct?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
Sergeant Pennie, share for this committee what the effect of the rhetoric directed at police officers has been to the men and women in the field, to the men and women risking their lives to keep us safe?
It's been demoralizing for our officers in the field, the officers that's trying to work hard to keep us safe. We just got to go back to the July 7, 2016 shooting attack and look at how the rise of anti-police sentiment was being used to incite violence against police. That actually radicalized an individual to come into downtown Dallas to shoot multiple people and kill 5 police officers. And those of you that have never seen a shooting before, it's even worse to imagine the carnage that happened on that day. To see the officers coming into the hospital and being wheeled in over and over again, one after the other. And Senator, you were there. America needs to understand that these are real lives. Officers are people too. They're here to do a difficult job, and they just want to go home to their families. But we cannot allow this irresponsible rhetoric that's being used to proliferate radical messages online to incite violence against police, because individuals are taking up arms and actually carrying out those attacks. So I encourage everyone, Senator, to be responsible, especially our leaders for this country. Be responsible in what they're putting out online, because it's endangering our lives. Thank you.